Hey Mo,
Hey, Ricky.
the doctor is in.
Yes, 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 we are on this gorgeous, wonderful Wednesday. And we're talking about ASCO. We got to tell people about it. And I want you both to share your experiences of being an advocate going into these scientific conferences because I feel like the advocates are like people in general who aren't scientific are afraid to go to these meetings, but there's so much information.
There's so much information and it's really overwhelming. Also, it's Juneteenth. We're celebrating Juneteenth.
That's right. Yes,
Check
we
out
are.
and we have the amazing, phenomenal, brilliant, beautiful, inside and out, Megan Claire Chase. And she has on her Juneteenth shirt. She's ready to rock. And so we're so happy she's here. And Shanta Chambers may join us too. So but Megan's here because Megan was running around. We run to these conferences. There were 40,000 people in Chicago.
Incredible.
1,000 people. Every hotel room was packed. Every restaurant was packed. Every street was packed. To get a Uber or a taxi anywhere near McCormick Place in Chicago was like a nightmare. And
Mhm.
and even in the convention center, there's traffic jams of the people walking. And you can tell who the doctors are because they're they're walking really fast. The researchers are kind of walking along, and the researchers like kind of have on jeans. The doctors are all dressed beautifully in suits, and women are the beautiful shoes, the whole thing. But the shoe thing. And then the advocates like us, we're just like trying to find our way to the next room, and
Yep.
trying to meet with our friends. But we did have, and Megan can really speak to this about the advocacy lounge. So I would say we had a really good amount of breast advocates. The one thing about ASCO is
Mhm.
it's all cancers. So
Yes, yes, it is.
everybody is there, lung, colon, all the cancers are there versus like our SABCS conference where it's just breast. So there's so many people. So when we see see a blessed, we like, oh my God, and we hug each other because, we're seeing all these other people that we don't know. But I think that we had a pretty good representation of blesties this year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Megan, talk to us about it. You were there, and we'll kind of talk about the science and talk about, but these meetings are just full of science and information, most of which is over my head, but we try to come back and make sense of it and how it's really going to impact our patients. So hopefully we can share some light on that today.
Hmm. And Megan Claire, tell us about give us a little bit of backstory about you and your diagnosis, but also about the first time you went to one of these meetings. Like, what was it like, and how are you doing now with it?
Oh, so yes, again, pleased as punch to be here.
Pleasure.
I am a stage 2A invasive lobular breast cancer survivor, 8 years now, eight. And I was diagnosed under 40 back in the day. And I used all of the experiences and the barriers that I kept coming up against, totally shifted my career to work in this space because there needed to be more people who look like me at the tables, right? And I remember my first ASCO was 2 years ago. And I was like, man, this place is bigger than the Georgia World Congress Center because I live in Atlanta. And it was massive, but as an extrovert, I love it. I think of it as like Vegas, but for oncology, because it is very,
That's a great analogy.
yeah,
That's
because
so
it is
great.
very, there's lots of,
We just need some more
lots of
shows.
stimulation.
Less data, more shows, right? Can we get
That's
a little
right.
add a little Cirque du Soleil, and I'm there. I'll be there every year.
Love it. I love it.
But yes, it is very science heavy. And though there is like a patient advocacy exhibit hall, and then there's the patient advocacy lounge. And that is so lovely to be able to have those two areas in the midst of everything else to connect and also get to talk to others in different
Yeah.
cancer spaces because I'm one of those people. I believe that yes, I need to know about my own, but I want to know about others because you just never know. And you never know who you might meet. And I had a lot of really beautiful and impactful interactions. And I was able to go to one session. And I have to say, I wish I could like give coaching and say, hey, there might be some people out there that are not scientists that are, not in research, but are patient advocates. We may have a pretty high level understanding, but still, like, it's everyone talks really fast. It's like there's no breath. And I think just trying to get as much out as possible. So what I did and what helped me was I would take videos, and luckily they
Yeah.
had huge screens everywhere,
Yeah.
which I think is really important. And I would take like pictures of that and be like, okay, I'm gonna have to like look at this later because it was a bit overwhelming. But what I like to tell people is if you're, it's still such a, even though it's huge, you still find your people. Like you still find
100%.
your community there, and you're still able to talk with others, be like, what are you up to? Or let's collaborate, or, and that's what I love about it so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ideas, the synergy. You're absolutely right. Yeah. It is electric with energy and optimism and enthusiasm. Even when the data doesn't always bear it out, it's the meeting of the minds, right? It's where people come who've been working on this stuff their whole
Yeah.
career. And and even the studies that just give the updates, I think are still important for people to know, because we want to know, how are things going? We started this trial, we're enrolling people, we've got advocates and patients who are asking about it, but how's it going? And what's happening? Is it headed in the right direction? So I feel like it can be really helpful to get that, but it is definitely information overload. And it's almost like taking a vacation, where if you haven't planned out what restaurants you're going to and what your itinerary is, you are going to be lost in New York City. That's how I feel. To me, it
Right.
feels like
Right.
being lost in New
Right.
York without a roadmap,
And
you
just,
know?
I think, you know what, it also reminds me of the immensity of cancer. When you see all this brain power of 40,000 doctors and scientists and patients, like all these people are working on cancer and all the cancers. And so it's a little bit scary because, gosh, you got all this brain power working on cancer and still not finding a cure. You know what I mean? But all of these people are in their individual labs working on their little piece of what they're trying to solve for, whether it's neuropathy and taxone, we can talk about that, or whether it's combining Keytruda with another drug to see how if it works better. So, but so in their
Yeah.
little piece, but now they're all together in this circus where they can share all their learnings and knowledge. And hopefully, like to me, I think if every pharma company working on a triple negative drug put all those scientists into one lab for a year, what would happen? Would they cure triple negative? Right? Because we have all these little
No.
fiefdoms happening all over, and corporate fiefdoms and owner, whatever. I want to own this myself. What would happen if everybody brought it together? So I feel like when you have an ASCO, they are sharing and bringing things together and maybe finding synergies that maybe somebody had a light bulb in their lab that could connect to the light bulb in this lab over here. And maybe it's a thing that we need, you know?
And it really speaks to, this is the point of it, is that cancer has so many different mechanisms that we should kind of talk about a little bit of this, because as we talk about what's interesting and what's late breaking and what's happening, the reason you can't cure it is because there's so many different ways that it happens. Basically, our basic understanding is one cell turns to two, two makes four, four makes a million, right? The cell decides it's not going to die. It's going to figure out a way around it. But the ways around cell death are so many, because it could be during the cell cycle, during the growth phase. So, it's like arresting in puberty, right? It could be hitting that growth spurt. And then at that point, it decides, you know what, I'm not going to go into adulthood. I'm going to stay in puberty forever. I'm just going to keep growing.
Mm.
Or it could decide, you know what, I'm not going to stay in puberty. I'm just not going to get any older, and I'm not going to die. It could stay an adult forever, right? And so there's different ways that the cancer cells can figure out how to live and how to evade. And that's why one treatment starts, but then the cell gets smart and says, oh, I know a way around that. And then a mutation happens, and then the drug doesn't work anymore. And so now we got to figure out another mechanism. And so different drugs target different things, but this is also why they combine them together and why there's all these different weird side effects. Megan Claire, we're going to talk about neuropathy, right? Some drugs, chemo drugs, target the fastest growing cells, which are your nerve cells. It's your hair cells. It's your GI system. And so it makes you have some of these toxic side effects.
That's what it is. No, I didn't know that, Mo. So
Mhm.
it's the fastest growing cells in your body that get the side effects. Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And so like anemia, your red blood cells every 7 days, you regenerate. So if it wipes out the blood cells and your bone marrow, then all of a sudden you're cold and you're anemic and your immune system's all wonky, or you got diarrhea because your GI cells got knocked out. And so but then there's different drugs now. Have you heard of this thing called antibody drug conjugates, ADCs?
Yeah. Can you explain to people that, because that's a hard one. We talked about it a little
So
bit. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. So antibodies are the things that trigger your immune system, right? An antibody is it's something to stimulate your immune system. When they take an antibody or something that stimulates your own immune system to work, and then they couple it with a drug, it's called an antibody drug conjugate. So it's a monoclonal antibody like Herceptin. Herceptin is
Okay.
considered a monoclonal. It targets one thing on the cell, one little gate, one door, one key. Herceptin targets that.
Right. Right.
Perjeta targets the other side of it. So it's like a French door, right? So Herceptin
Okay.
and Perjeta, they put those two together. We
Right.
used to not know about Perjeta. It was just the
Mhm.
Herceptin or the trastuzumab. And so we could open one side of the French door. Now we know it's a French door and you hit Herceptin, Perjeta, you do them both. But those drugs target just that door. That's what a monoclonal antibody does.
Okay.
So they take that and then they put it with another type of drug, put them together, and now you got your immune system is opening the door so the drug can get in.
Got
See?
it. Okay.
The immune
Okay.
system
Got it.
unlocked the door, so now that drug can get into the cell and it can deliver a more therapeutic dose instead of just
Wow.
splashing on the cell. We're going to splash bleach everywhere and all your clothes get bleached, or we're going to go right into the machine and target just the white clothes because it's Juneteenth. But okay, I shouldn't have said that. But you get what I'm saying, right?
I love it.
Okay, I'm going on mute. But you got to know this because all the drugs coming out now are coupled with something else.
Yes.
And so that term,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
the
yeah,
antibody drug
yeah, yeah,
conjugates, you
yeah.
got drugs like the, trastuzumab that's targeted with the TDX, the darituxin, daritecan,
Mhm.
and these drugs are having some impact and they're working in breast cancer, especially for the HER2 low. HER2 low. We
Let's
used
talk
to
about
just
her too low. Okay, talk about her too
all
low.
right.
People
And then
don't.
I'm going
Break
to
it
stop
down
talking.
for us.
And then we're talking about side effects. But the thing with the HER2 is when we talk about hormone receptors on a cancer cell, each cancer cell has 3 stations on it. One for ER, one for PR, one for HER2. They're like toll booths on the turnpike, right? 2 of them are hormone receptors. They receive your hormone, your dollar, you pay the toll, and you go through and tell more cancer cells to grow. That's the ER and the PR. The HER2 is the third one. When we look at how those cells are expressing these things, we used to put a dye down on the microscope, like Easter egg dye, and you count how many cells lit up for the receptor. So they give you a percentage, 70% ER positive, 2% ER negative, or triple negative. None of them light up. You put the green dye for ER, you put the purple dye for HER2, and nothing lights up. It's TNBC,
Right.
right? Because those receptors or those stations are absent. Your cancer cell is bald, okay?
Right.
So now we know that HER2 isn't just that you put the dye down and it's there or it isn't. There's degrees, there's levels to this. So they put now they can tell if the HER2 is there, but it's at a lower level of expression. And what they're finding is that there are some drugs that we should have been giving people because they had some HER2, not enough to trigger the threshold for HER2 positive or negative, but they had some HER2
Her
that
too.
was low. And
So
so
were,
now
were they thought to be triple negative until her two came about?
maybe, and we don't know.
Okay.
And that's a really tricky thing because there's people whose TNBC might have came back, but they might have been eligible for HER2 therapies. If we had known that HER2 had levels of expression and it wasn't just on or off, it's sort of kind of on, it's on a little bit like a dimmer. Instead of a light switch is on or off, there's a dimmer for HER2. And so even if you got a little bit of HER2, there's drugs that we could give that are now for HER2 low. And some of these are those antibody drug conjugates. Okay. So now we're finding
her two, the new drug on her two.
exactly.
And her
And
two
so now they're
like
testing.
the ASCO last year, because it was approved by the FDA and it's doing miracles, right? That's the
And
drug.
HER2 is a really good example. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the trial that Sheila was in for 6 years,
Yeah.
gave her 6
Yeah.
years.
Yep. And Sheila was HER2 positive, but there's a lot of women who are TNBC that might have some levels of HER2. So there's some clinical trials looking at this and finding the women who had TNBC, let's say it went metastatic, right? And now we can check their tumors and see, were they truly TNBC or were they HER2 low? And so it's not quite standard of care yet for
Right.
early stage breast cancer. So when you get diagnosed and you got stage 1 or stage 2, like Megan Claire, they're not checking for HER2 high or low. They're still saying it's a 1+, 2+, or 3, and anything 1 or 2+ is considered HER2 negative. Anything 3+ is probably going to be HER2 positive. But now we can start to check this, and there's going to be, I say, in the next 5 years, we're going to be quantifying everybody's HER2 statuses, whether or not they're HER2 expressing or HER2 low. Meaning, could we give you more targeted drugs like Herceptin, those monoclonal antibodies that just target those cells, and then make the treatments a little bit less toxic? Because toxicity is a really real thing, right, Megan Claire?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
it is.
Before we talk about even toxic side effects, can we just talk about lobular breast cancer, what Megan Claire had? Because we need to explain that to people too, because it's kind of rare.
Well, I'll let you explain it first. Tell us how you explain it to other advocates. Somebody calls and say, yeah, they told me I have this invasive lobular thing. What the heck is going on? What does it mean? What do you tell them?
Right. So I still remember the first time when I got that cancer call and the doctor said, yeah, you have invasive lobular breast cancer. And I was like, I have what? Like, I didn't even know that there were different
Sure.
types of breast
Sure.
cancer, right?
Sure.
And so it really threw me for a loop. And what I learned is that it's often referred to as the sneaky cancer because it can often be missed, unfortunately, on like the preventative mammograms. And I was able to get one early because my mother is an ovarian cancer survivor, and that link between breast and ovarian. So I was able to get one, because technically I wasn't old enough. And they told me, hey, you're clear, you're fine, come back when you're 40. I'm like, all right. But I had very strange symptoms that I like to tell people. They're very different. And so no one thought this was breast because nothing was going on there. But I knew something was wrong. And so what I tell people is it can mask and look like healthy tissue. And that's why it's called sneaky. And it's very slow growing. And it's also it's rare in Black people.
Women, yeah.
And when I would ask questions about it, they'd often say, oh, well, we're just going to treat it like ductal, invasive ductal. And I was like, but if they're different, like I couldn't really wrap my head around it. So I'm really is now actually shining a spotlight on lobular as well and doing more research. But unfortunately, there's not enough for Black women within that space as well to even understand, like, why did I get this if my genetic testing says, it wasn't hereditary, I was HER2 negative, ERPR positive, like what else was going on that it ended up being lobular? And it's rare to actually meet others that have lobular that look like me.
Yeah, I introduced you to one last week, but
Exactly. And I'm going to be
and ER positive HER2. Okay, wow, interesting. Okay, so you have to explain that to me a little bit. But did you have a lump?
It's so I'll never forget it. Like, so part of my story is it was August 31st, 2015. Take you back. I was obsessed with the show Supergirl. Like, I don't know why, but this particular episode was like,
You're a
yes,
Supergirl.
right. I was so into it that first season. And
It was
because
such a good show, though. It really was.
it really was, I mean, especially
Good
that
show.
first
Really
season,
good show.
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And because so one of my symptoms of that I knew something was wrong was I was gaining weight, so my breast got bigger. So I was always playing with them because I was like, oh my God, I never had big boobs before. I was very slim but athletic figure. So I was like, oh my gosh, well, that morning I didn't feel anything. But that evening, when I was like, oh, I'm gonna take a shower, get into my jammies, and I felt it like right here. And the sucker was huge. It's like it came out of nowhere, like it was palpable. It was like about like the length of my fist, and it was as hard as a rock. And so because I have a lot of cancer in my family, so I automatically knew it was a mass. But I was like, where did this come from? Because it wasn't there this morning.
Wow.
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 And
Wow.
the thing about the lobular ones are that the way they look under the microscope is they look you'll hear this word over and over again. They call it bland. Not to say that anything is boring or bland about you, Megan Claire, but when we look at the invasive breast cancers under the ductal ones, looks like a twisty candy or a little bomb with, and all the cells are like flying out of the duct like this, right? It's like confetti, and you can see them under the microscope doing this. The lobular ones just kind of like meander along, and it looks like somebody just colored outside the line a little bit, and so they look really basic. And they don't always look like cancer, but it's also that they don't show up on mammograms and ultrasound sometimes because there isn't this huge inflammatory reaction around it. Because think about it, something ruptures out of the duct, then you get a lot of inflammatory, you get this lump. The lobular ones, it's like poof, they just kind of wander outside the lines and you don't know it until you feel it, until they're bigger. My grandmother had the same thing. Invasive lobular carcinoma started in one breast, went over to the other, well, didn't go to the other side, but it can happen in both breasts.
Right.
And so it's why we have to do the MRIs and things, and we have to really look for it. And it's not that it's a more aggressive kind, but it's sneakier. They call it the ghost sometimes.
Mm,
Right.
wow.
Yeah.
So right, because that is part of my treatment of
Yeah.
MRIs, and that's the only time I really feel like, okay, you're really seeing it is when I get the MRI.
So what chemo did you take?
I had the Red Devil and the Cytoxin and then the Taxol. So I had the ACT.
I had it. Well, yeah, I had it. And when I had it 12 years ago, they gave it to me all together. Like now they break it up. But I had all three of them in one whammy thing. Bam,
What?
time. Yeah, all at the same time.
Oh my gosh, I had AC together and then the Taxol.
Yeah, no, I had them all. And actually they would put the Taxol and the Cytoxin in my port directly from the IV. But the adriamycin, it was red and it was in a giant syringe, and they would put that one in separately out of this giant syringe. It was, and I was just
Yeah.
so surprised because I knew that was the killer, man, but it was like you got this, it was still went through my port, but it was like a needle into the
They
port.
do a needle. Yeah.
It was nasty. It was nasty.
And the reason they give them together, again, back to that concept of how we kill cancer cells, so that the Taxol breaks up the stability or the scaffold of the cell. Think about, you go through New York, you go through DC, all the buildings have scaffolds on them now because they're doing some renovation,
Right.
right? So that structural part of it, Taxol breaks that up. So imagine if you chopped away at all the scaffolds on the sidewalk down, walking down New York City. Right. And then the adriamycin and the Cytoxin target the cell cycle. So how fast those cells are growing, and it stops the older ones it helps the older ones that are trying to live forever to finally die. And so
Wow.
they put all those together and you get a treatment that works really well, but you also get a treatment that has a lot of side effects to it.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And that's one of the studies that came out of this, of ASCO. But you want to talk about side effects a little bit? I mean, there was a finding, and I'm just going to read this from this study from ASCO. Black women with early stage breast cancer who received the chemotherapy medicine Taxotere, Taxol is the chemical name, every 3 weeks had less peripheral neuropathy, the numbness feeling in your hands, than Black women who received the chemotherapy medicine named Taxol. So they kept telling me Taxotere and Taxol are the same thing. So if you took Taxotere, you had less neuropathy than Taxol. So are those drugs interchangeable, Mo? Is it okay to take one versus the other? Can you choose? So if you're newly diagnosed and they want to give you Taxol, you want to ask, can you ask for Taxotere, or should you ask for Taxotere to have less neuropathy?
So Taxotere freezes those tubules. So think about in the wintertime, if you freeze icicles, right? It freezes the internal skeleton and then blocks the assembly of the building blocks, as opposed to just hacking them off at the knees. So there are some differences in them. But I think that you could interchange them. And it's very institutional who gets what. It's in the guidelines a little bit. So Taxol and Taxotere are almost 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. But we're finding out that 6 and that half a dozen, might be a baker's half a dozen, right? It might be 7 instead of 6 for some women. And that's what's really interesting about this, because they were never really studied in terms of how a certain race or ethnicity or background responds. And it gives a little bit of credence to the fact that there may be some ways in which we metabolize drugs that are different than others. like our
Yes.
liver and how we metabolize things.
Yeah.
Now, the scary thing for me, Megan, I got to tell you, is that what I don't want to see is I don't want to see us de-escalating therapy for Black women because we have more side effects. But
Right.
we're also the ones who have more aggressive tumors
Right.
that need the higher dose. We need to figure out a way to manage these side effects as opposed to giving a lower dose. Like we need to figure that out before we just say, give me a
Give me a lesser dose. Yeah. Yeah.
dose
Totally
because there's
agree.
lesser side
Yeah.
effects.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I don't think that we're not asking for that as advocates. What I don't want to see is doctors reading this and saying, oh, well, I'm going to give my Black patient this because they'll have less side effects. And we don't know how it impacts their overall survival or their disease-free or progression-free survival, all those fancy words to say your cancer coming back.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think the one thing about this study was that it was among Black women, which is great. Hello, thank you, God, for that. We need more and more and more of that. And I'm not sure even how many women were in that study, but that's what we need when we start talking about clinical trials, to have a clinical trial designed specifically for Black women is what we need more of. So, and we didn't know this before, to even have this conversation. But
You're right. And we need the long-term data, right?
Yeah,
We need not just 2 years, not just,
right,
6 months.
right,
We want to know
right,
5 years, 10 years, 15 years that these
right.
women are, one, still alive, two, their cancer didn't come back, and three, they're still not having latent or long-term side effects from this. So I think you're absolutely right, Ricky. And I hope that women get in it and stay in it. Do the follow-up.
Do the study,
Because we keep tracking you,
Yeah.
even after you're no longer getting the drugs, we're going to call and say, hey, how are you doing? Hey, how's it go? Hey, has your cancer, what did your last scan show? Like we keep tracking patients
right,
for
right.
like years.
And
So
I'm
you got to
just,
stay with it.
yeah, this study actually had 239 Black women in it.
It's amazing.
Which is pretty good, right? So it's funny when you talk about neuropathy, I don't feel neuropathy until I talk about it. Like I can feel it in my toes right now because we're talking about it. Isn't that ridiculous? I only feel it when I'm talking about it, but some people are debilitated by it. Tia, you said she used to love wearing 4-inch heels, and Tia's tall. She's tall. I mean, but I used to wear 4-inch heels. I was all about the heels, and she wears flat now. She cannot wear heels anymore.
Hi. Yep.
And I mean, and some people have really bad pain from neuropathy. So to not have that side effect is a huge, huge life-changing thing that you may not need to deal with if you don't take that drug. So now we have validation and evidence to say, hold on, I don't want that one. I want this one, right?
Well, what I, feel really strongly about, because I had a very severe reaction in my first 15 minutes of my first Taxol treatment. It took me years to figure out exactly how to describe it, but it felt like a current from like head to toe went zoop, and just like my nerves died. And I started screaming in the infusion room, and they were like, ah, and by the damage was done. And I was like, is there no test? And this is back in 2016. I was like, is there no test to see who's more susceptible to this? Because I was told maybe by the 8th to 10th, I might feel a little, neuropathy, a little tingling or numbness in my hands and feet, and to put my hands in like the ice and all that. There was no there was no time to do that. But my issue is like, yes, we need to take the treatment, like what is recommended, ask the questions, but it's like when we do have the side effects, believe us, and also like have a plan. Like no one told me like after I finished everything, you know what, you may want to try OT or PT, or let's try, like I didn't get the next step after. And I feel if I had had that,
we
maybe.
don't get any of that. We don't get any of that. We don't get any of that. That's why we love our nurse navigation thing, which is a whole nother conversation, but we all need to have a navigator supporting us with this stuff, right?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. So I'm looking at this other study. So we know that Keytruda has been doing great things for triple negative. But they only had 4% Black women in their clinical trial, but they're now starting to see real world data, like we talked about a few weeks ago, where patients who are taking the drug in the real world are thriving and getting better. And so there was a study where they combined it with Trodelvy, which is the other. So we have 2 triple negative drugs, those 2. Keytruda is the only one we have for early stage triple negative. And to take it for metastatic, you have to have a PD-L1 gene mutation. So you have to have a specific gene mutation to be able to get it. Trodelvy is for third line metastatic triple negative, meaning you would have had to take 2 other medications before you take this one. So they're still, not for everybody, right? So, but now this study actually combined the 2 of them. And I think I love how now the drug companies are saying, okay, here are the 2 best drugs we have for triple negative. What happens if we put them together?
And it makes a lot of sense because if you think about a war, right, you don't just deploy your snipers, right? You're gonna get your tanks out, you're gonna drop your bombs, you're gonna use your fighting jets, you're gonna use everything. And
Yeah.
whether it's made by Boeing or made by, whoever else, you need to, you like marshal all the resources. So I think it's a really smart thing for them to do, especially because there's some synergy in how they work. But what people should understand about these is that a lot of this the eligibility for the drugs not only depends on your stage and what medicines you tried before, but also on genetic testing. So Keytruda, for example, is what we call a PARP inhibitor. And the way it works is it blocks every cell has a button that tells it when to die. It's called programmed death receptor. And it's like the button, what do they say when the president has his finger on the button, the nuclear bomb button? Right? Every cell has that button. And
Yeah.
Keytruda targets that button because there's certain people who have a certain type of button. If you have the BRCA mutations, right, you're more likely to respond to some of that. But it can be very helpful for you to know. So you got to get genetic testing to know if you should get, and I'm thinking Lynparza. Lynparza is a PARP inhibitor. Keytruda is the PD-L1. You got to be tested for that particular receptor. So it's like a key that opens a certain lock. And so when you get genetic testing, it can help you to know which drugs are going to work better for you. So it's not just like about your kids and get tested to see if you have the BRCA mutation to see if you need to get your ovaries out, but like what drugs are working for you now. And so it's really important for people, if you didn't get offered genetic testing, to go back and do that. You can do that now. If you only got the BRCA1 and 2, you can do a whole panel of genetic testing now. And it's really helpful to know how to treat you.
Right. And you shouldn't have to pay for it. You should be able to get it and learn more about how to make it effective in your treatment. I think the other thing there was a study that at ASCO they talked about combining those 2 drugs, but for HER2, not for triple negative, and taking those drugs that are now working great for TNBC patients and putting them into HER2 patients. So
yeah. And vice versa, right? The
and
HER2
vice
low, because you
right,
might be
right,
TNBC,
right,
but you might
right,
have some HER2.
right,
You
right.
might be quadruple negative and have an androgen receptor,
Mhm.
right? Like there's all sorts of new things that we learn that come out of these meetings. And I think it's so good to know that and your doctor should always have this mindset when you pick your oncologist. What we know now is not all there is to know. The things I do in surgery now, we didn't do 10 years ago even.
Right. We didn't do
So
10.
it's be a lifelong learner. And if your doctor poo-poos and says, oh, that's not really the thing or whatever, ask your doctor, you know what, 5 years ago, were you prescribing this very same thing or was it something different? 10
Right.
years ago, were you doing this or was there a standard of care that was different? This is how we inform the standard of care, is by doing this research and by embracing innovation in this space.
Yeah, I mean, even when I got genetic tested the first time, it was half the number of genes I was tested for like 5 years ago when I did it again, right? Right. So that study, that particular study with Keytruda and also and Trodelvy did well, is doing well. So the thing is, again, though, we don't know about Black women, how many Black women are in the study. It's just about the drug itself overall. So that's why we need more Black women in trials. And I did go look at a few posters. The posters are when the scientists come and kind of show their whole story and what they're doing on a piece of paper, on a poster board. And I literally just walk around to look at how many Black women were in those studies. And it was still very, 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 very disappointing. 2, 4, 3. I think the biggest number I saw was like 7. And it's just unacceptable. And when I even asked the scientists, we don't know how to find them, we don't know how to do it. Like, you know what? So let us help you. So, because we know that you're not being asked. So you guys, if you have the opportunity to do a trial, ask your doctor. Don't wait to be asked. sign up to do it because it's really the best science we have. It's the best science we have, the most advanced science we have.
Yep. Yep.
You have to do it.
Very true. I think the other thing to know is we talk about side effects, because I see somebody in the chat has put
Yeah.
in that, some doctors don't recommend chemo for their own family members because of the toxins and so forth, is that there are more options now for the managing toxic side effects. So like medically induced alopecia, hair loss. Right. We have trials looking at cold cap therapy in women with all different hair textures. We have some studies that are starting to look at managing things like neuropathy, not just with ice therapy, but also with integrative therapies like acupressure and acupuncture, and all these things are becoming much more mainstream. And so it becomes an issue of, doing what you have to do in order to kill cancer cells, but knowing that there's ways to help your body to heal itself, and that there's more accepted integrative therapies that are out there as well. And that for me is a really exciting thing about this, because, for so long people felt like, especially Black people, you had to choose. It's either CMOS or chemo, and you couldn't do both.
Right.
And other folks who have had the means have been doing this stuff all along. They've been looking at movement and mindfulness and nutrition and all this stuff as part of their regular part of their journey. Megan Claire, we talk about survivorship, all that stuff that helps. Who has access to that? And so there's some really good information, I think, coming down the pipe. But what encourages me is seeing organizations like you all that are really starting to be involved in the research, not just the drug trials, but in the survivorship side of things as well. You would talk a little bit about, sort of share and what's happening there, and the interesting work that you all are doing in that space.
Sure. So, for those that don't know, I work for Share Cancer Support. I am the breast cancer program director and host of our BC Life podcast. And we,
good.
yeah, thank you. I'm very
I
proud.
love that podcast. It's one of my favorites.
It's
Not just
great.
because I love it either.
Um, and
Megan.
so aside from coming up with different types of programs, I am very intentional on making sure it's diverse in race, different positions, and I'm working on a couple of grants right now, and this one, it's for Black breast cancer survivors. And we had Ricky on to do a program for us to talk about why Black data matters, which was fantastic. And so thank you again, Ricky, for doing that, but also recognizing that, we're surviving longer if you're in early stage. And therefore we need more, care. It's like, how do we process all that we've been through? And so what we're doing is support groups, but they're very targeted, specific topics. And then we're also going to start peer mentoring, one-to-one peer mentoring with another Black breast cancer survivor. So it's being able to, let down your hair and really get vulnerable and talk and see what ways we can help you and what resources you need, so we can direct you in the right way and let you know that you're not alone. And we're here, and more important, as I always like to say with everything I do within my advocacy, is that you matter. And we're here to listen and, more importantly, help guide you, because that's the thing, right? A lot of times we don't know what to do next, or we're thinking we're the only ones that are feeling this way, or should we feel this way? And so we're excited to be working on that. And I'll actually be in New York next week. We have our Getting Our Fair Share. It's our Health Disparities Conference. So I'm excited to lead a session in the peer mentoring and what that means. And another one, we're talking about cancer for the LGBTQIA plus community. I want to shout out for that community too, as in June.
It's Pride, baby. That's right.
It's
You know,
Pride,
and
baby. That's our show next week. It's Pride.
oh, get out.
Oh,
So
good. I can present our research from the American Cancer Society. We published a
Great,
paper on
great.
healthcare disparities in the queer
Great.
community. So yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Dean is going to be on with us next week, Mo. So we're going to talk about that. Great.
and I wanted to add like one thing to that. What was exciting, I was asked to sit on the panel as an ally, and I've never been asked to do something like that before, because at ASCO, I feel it's very important. Everyone who knows me for 2 seconds knows I am all about like inclusion, walking in your truth. And so I was talking to someone in industry, and I know they're seeing a lot of pink and they were feeling some kind of way about that. And I was like, you know what? I get it. So here are the ways that, the things that I can do that's within my wheelhouse that I'm able to do. And just talking with them, they were like, you know what? I even have it right here. They gave me this pen. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see it, but yeah, this pen, and if you wear this, it means for
Wonderful.
the LGBTQIA community that you're a safe person to be around. And I felt so honored with that because, I think about it when they get breast cancer and maybe they're in a body that they don't identify with. And it's like, you still matter. We still need to get that cancer out of you. We still need you in the clinical
Right.
trials. We still need you, like
Doing
to
the
still
thing.
take
Yeah.
care of yourself. And so it's just been a real honor, and the way I view things, from the Black lens, the patient lens, the survivor lens, the caregiver lens. And I don't like to say ally. I like to be like, I'm just a good human, have
You're a
the
good human.
empathy,
You're a
because
good
it's
human.
hard going
Yeah.
through breast cancer and
And
just
actually, one of the best sessions at ASCO was the Genentech party that was led by Scout. Mo,
love Scout.
love Scout so much.
That's my homie. Scott was just here in Philly and I missed him. But yeah, he's a co-author on the article that we just published, and there's going to be a lot more in that space. So next year, I think we're looking at doing a Pride parade at ASCO, because it's always during the first of the month at the beginning of Pride. But more
Yeah,
panels,
yeah.
more conversations, more support, more survivorship, and more data. We just, when you talk about disparity and minority within a minority, and marginalized within marginalized, we need more data about the LGBTQ community and their cancer experience, so that we can better tailor treatment, survivorship, everything, and teach clinicians how to just be decent humans, like like Megan Claire said,
Yes,
just
human.
be, yeah,
I know.
be a decent human.
I'm gonna ask him if we can have the video that he showed last week. But he made a video that was amazing of just showing patients and what the experiences they had and the discrimination they saw, and it was horrible. It was horrible, but he painted a picture with this video that Genentech helped him make. And but I applaud, Genentech is an awesome partner for us. They've been from day one, is one of our best supporters. But I applaud Lauren Davis's commitment to this audience that's so much needed. And then, Mo, was it 2 years ago that we went to Tulum?
Yes, it was
Yeah,
2 years now. No, I think three
3 years
years
ago. Oh my
now.
gosh, you're right. 3 years ago we went to
3 years.
but our community needs to have so much more support and be welcomed into the care they deserve, just like Black women, just like any subgroup, and so
Mhm.
but I applaud that Genentech actually dedicated an event
Yep.
to and let Scott kind of lead it and bring the community to the audience that needed to hear.
And I
Yeah,
would just like
that's
to
awesome.
say tomorrow, I the episode that I did with a transgender breast slash chest cancer, that episode comes out on our BC Life, and really, it's so beautiful. I feel honored that he was vulnerable with me, and I think it'll be a really beautiful episode and a little insight into the experience of a transgender man with uh,
Mhm.
breast slash chest cancer. So our BC
Tell me,
Life.
tell me
Hi.
when it's on, and I'll put it in the comments.
Tag me on social so I can send it out too.
You
I'll
know
blast it
I
out if you
Oh
tag
will.
me.
yeah, send
Do it,
tag,
baby.
tag us on social. We'll post it. But also I forgot to mention, Haley is actually speaking at the Share conference next week.
Yes.
Yeah, about, I think, just about DEI, about diversity.
Mhm.
So she'll talk about clinical trials. So she'll be there too next week. We'll have our team there. I won't be there. I'm
Awesome.
gonna be in Jamaica, but
Yes, you will be
I'm
enjoying it.
What?
I wish I had known. I would have tried to be there. I won't be able to make it, but I'm sending love to you all, and I'll plan to come to the next one. I think we'll have some really exciting things to talk about. But we are having questions about that conference.
yeah,
Could you please put a
yes.
link in the chat so that folks who maybe
Tell
want
us,
to
yeah,
register and
yeah.
be remote or at least check the highlights or learn more about Share can
Yeah.
participate, because the comments we're getting, there is no roadmap. Cancer doesn't have a roadmap. So how do we, you don't get a roadmap on how to navigate survivorship, and it sounds like a great program. And there are so many resources now for people who are in survivorship, which we say starts at day one, but the saying cancer begins when it ends, right? It's
Yeah.
like dealing with everything after your treatments are over is so important. And there's research for that, and there's trials for that too. So if you're thinking about it and like, I wish there was a trial for me, guess what? There probably is one for you. Ricky, aren't you in one right now?
Yes, I'm in one. I'm just starting one about dental health.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Ooh.
And
So,
so see, there's a trial that's not a drug trial, it's a dental health trial. There's trials on mental health, on physical health, on exercise, on nutrition. There are clinical trials for everything. And so I think it's so important as we look at Juneteenth that we're talking about being free and self-determining, right? And what our ancestors went through to acknowledge earned medical mistrust. Cancer support community had a really great video that I think it won a Tubby or a Telly Award or something, Teletubby Award. I should get this right.
I was having award.
It won some kind of award because it highlighted the earned medical mistrust in the oncology community, especially, but the promise of that, right?
Yes,
As descendants
yes,
of the people who were the strongest ones, like we're the descendants of the ones who chose to survive the Middle Passage.
Wow.
And so it's so important for you to know that our ancestors went through what they went through so that we could have a more fair experience. They asked the Tuskegee a person, one of the experiment, one of the folks who was involved involuntarily, not a participant, not a willing participant, but an involuntary participant in the Tuskegee experiment, whether or not and what he thought about his children participating in research. And he said it was so that his research and his participation wouldn't have been in vain, right? So that we could have learned better and done better. So his children and children's children would have a better opportunity in medicine and in healthcare. And so we have that opportunity. And it's a good thing to reflect on Juneteenth, that, we need to be a part of the conversation, not peripheral to it, not on the sideline saying, see, I knew that XYZ, but
Yeah.
like get in the game,
Get in the-
get at the table.
be at the big, as Dr. Keith said, we want to be at the big table, at the big
There
people
you
table.
go.
I put the link, Ricky.
I
For you
see
to
the link.
take
I'm
a
going to
look.
put it in the comments.
And you know what I wanted to say about the clinical trials and thinking of Juneteenth? When I was at ASCO, when I wasn't in our booth, I like to take the opportunity to walk around to the different pharmaceutical booths. It's kind of like my little test to see like how long it takes them to come over to me and how do they talk to me, and especially if I see clinical trials or diversity in clinical trials. So I'll go up there and I'm looking because I've got the marketing lens too, and I'm like, And then when they come over, and I had such an amazing conversation with this one, and I was like, hey, I said, I like what you're doing here, showing like disability and all this. I said, but I still don't see myself up there. Why? And it just, so don't be afraid that when you're at these
Say that,
conferences
right.
to ask questions like that. So even if the science or the sessions may be like, I'm not really sure, but as a patient advocate, it's so important to like go up, and that's your one big chance to like talk to all these different pharmaceutical companies and ask them about their process. And I think what's missing too in the clinical trial conversation is, there are regulations now. So when we think about Tuskegee and all of that, now because of those atrocities, we now have really tight regulations. We're seeing the level of care that you're given when you are in a clinical trial is amazing. And so it's about building that trust back.
Yes, and again, we say it every week, all the time. There is no sugar pill in cancer research.
Correct.
There is no sugar pill. You're going to get standard of care. And frankly, we know from data that people who participate in trials have better outcomes.
Yeah.
You're being watched more closely. You're being prodded, poked, whatever. You're getting more frequent scans. You have a better understanding of what's going on with your body and how your cancer is responding to the treatment. And if there's any little wrinkle or progression, they got you right away. You're not waiting for 3 months to the next scan. And so it's really the medicine of tomorrow, today. And it's the best science we have. And, I tell women who have it like you, Megan, that if you have breast cancer under 40, a trial is your best solution. And I'm not a doctor. I just play one on Facebook. actually with Mo. Backing me up. But
But you do it so well, darling. I have to tell you, you're setting some folks free in the chat here. People are like, you know what? I finally get it. Thank you for explaining things in ways that I can understand. And this is the power of advocacy. Because
yeah,
you hear about these big meetings and you're like, okay, I don't know if I could do that. One, I'm worried about funding. I'm worried about going. What if I don't understand things? But you make so many connections and you find that there are
yes.
people like Ricky, people like Megsy, who are on fire about this, and they will help you to get involved and get started so that you won't be the only person in Nevada. Somebody in the chat's like, I'm the only Black person in Nevada. I bet you there's more. And I bet you if we organize and we can help you get, figure out where those folks are and get you connected to some people. But there's so much work for us to do, and it's something for everybody to do. So
Yes.
don't be on the sidelines about this. Not at all.
And you know what I like to say too, uh, about clinical trials, and I said this at ASCO when I was having these different conversations, is if you don't meet that criteria, like I remember, and I think this is so important to say, like I remember when I felt I was perfect for this clinical trial, I was like, what do you mean? I check off every single box, and I was, you know, rejected. And I was like, what? Like, I mean, I was like upset, right? And then it hit me. I was like, you know what? This is kind of like dating. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And so I can't let that deter me. And so I kept looking again for another one. And that is something I want to like really impress upon people, that if in case, you don't get into one trial, don't let that stop you.
Don't let it stop you. Don't
You
let it stop,
know?
True.
let it stop you. And we will help you. Our portal on our site, it's right there on whenwetrial.org. And it collects your information. If you get stuck, there's an 800 number right there for you to call us, and we can help you match the trial that you need. And we're working with so many docs now and PIs with trials. If you want to get into a trial, just call us. You know how to reach me. I'll put my, Ricky at touchbbca.org. But we
Oh, I
are.
already put your stuff in the chat, ma'am.
You got it.
Because there's some folks who are like, you know what, this is great. I love to be a part of this. Tell us
Yeah.
what area of interest and advocacy you're in and what show you want. We'll create a theme. We'll
Yeah.
have you on as a guest.
Yeah, come on
Absolutely.
our show, talk about it. And if you are in a trial and want to talk about it, bring it. I'll put your email too, Megan. But we
So,
need more science, and that's why we need more ASCOs and
yes.
ASCO. I think a lot came out of it, but we're really looking forward, as usual, to SABCS in December, because that's where we're focused on breast cancer. Kind of old home week for us advocates, but I know more breast cancer knowledge will come out of that, and even some of the science. I'm actually going to a conference tomorrow with this group called Black in Cancer. Melissa and I are there, and it's
Oh, I know them. Tell them I said hi. They're
so
awesome.
young.
Sarah's going to be there too. Sarah will be there.
They're all so young, and they're all these young, bright minds focused on research, and they just I spoke there last year, and they blow me away. So we'll be there with them this week at NIH, and they got NIH to support them. So
That's fantastic.
and Cancer Research UK.
Wow.
So they have the support of the big wigs, and they're doing great things. So we're happy to be a part of that conversation.
Can I say one thing? At ASCO, and I know we think about SABCS for breast cancer, but I want to tell you that though there were other cancers there, I had so many meaningful conversations with these other organizations, and then they would be like, you know what, my friend is going through breast cancer and she doesn't know what to do or where to go. And I was like, me, so I actually like something like that actually happened this week, where the person did reach out and they're like, hey, my friend, met you at ASCO and she gave me your information, and I was able to give her financial resources. Like, you just never know who needs the help or how that might get to someone else. And even though it might be other cancers there, we're all collectively each other and help each other find the resources and support that we need for our specific cancers and our friends and family.
It's a family affair. And, we all know too many other people with cancer. Everybody's got a story.
Yeah.
Seems to be more and more and more every day. That's one thing. We get new customers in our family every day. But that's why we're here. This is our God job, and we're going to keep on doing it and be the support that people need. And hopefully, but tell us, email us, tell us what you need, and we're happy to oblige. So next year, maybe we'll do a poster at ASCO, guys. Let's figure out how we can do that. And participate in some of this research, and bring more science, but we need some more drugs. We need more support for Black women, and we're going to keep fighting for it.
That's right.
Got that right. You got that right. And I think that yeah, keep fighting, but also be encouraged, because it's easy to feel disheartened by the overwhelming plethora of trials and of studies and of things that just, you just don't know. You don't know what's working, you don't know when, and you don't know how to take it all. But the fact that there are so many people working on this, right? The fact that there's so much that's happening in this space is really, it is encouraging.
It is
And
The
I
hope
just hope,
alive. That's right.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we know it's happening, and we get calls pretty much every week from our pharma partners. Thank God for them. We're very blessed to have them in our family who are looking for Black women in their trials. And so we're trying to help them find and participate in this, do this science with us. And so I really do feel like pharma is on our side. They have given us a seat at the table, and they really are trying to do their best to get more Black women represented in this research. So
To also show that I felt like a big theme at ASCO was about, being trustworthy, and I feel like that is happening now. And knowing that it's like they see us now. You know what I mean? It's like, I wish you had a while ago, but it's
I
like
know.
you got to think now, and it's like, okay, we see you, and therefore that's why we're trying so hard to help and advocate and make sure that we're getting, you know, Black people, Black women into clinical trials, and just making them informed and feel
Right.
more empowered
Yes.
over their care.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and that again is that today is Juneteenth, and to close this out, that's the commitment, that's the promise we should all be making on this Juneteenth. It's also Black Family Wellness Week and knowing your family history. There's something else that it is, but
Men's
we've been
Health Month. It's Men's Health Month this month.
that too. It's Men's Health Month, but like
Yeah.
double down on the concept that that health and wellness is for you, not just something that happens to you if you're lucky.
Mhm.
And I feel like I grew up learning and thinking that if you're lucky, you'll get through life without having a cancer, without this, without that. But we can do better and know better, and we can leave a better legacy for our families than just, oh, Nana had something down there and Pop had the sugar, and we don't really go to doctors. Like and it's hard to say, and it's even harder to do. Take it from somebody who is a doctor in a white coat every day. Let's be honest. Like if I'm my own baby is ugly, but we have to do it. And do it for our children, but do it for our ancestors who couldn't do it.
Right, who couldn't do it, and
Couldn't do it.
who did pave this way for us to do it, and that's why we're here.
Exactly. There it is.
So next week we have D Manual. We're going to talk about pride. We're going to talk about some advances, and I'm going to try to see if even Scott can come on. Want to call Scott and see if he can come on?
I think Scout would do it. Let me see if he's available. Absolutely. But
Yeah.
we'll talk a little bit about the research that we just did with the American Cancer Society, and talk about, what still needs to happen in this equity space for our LGBTQ community, who are, there's risk factors for all different types of cancers, just like breast, and a lot of them are related to where they live and, what access they have. And so, those are the things that where you live should determine whether or not and if you live.
Right.
Not in 2024. So we got to do better.
Gotta do better. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Megsy. I love you so much, and thank you so much for being here. You
I
gotta
just love you.
I know you're the best. You're the best.
Mhm. And Ricky, happy birthday all month long. Enjoy
Thank
it.
you.
Enjoy
You know
today.
I'm having dance parties every day. Don't worry
I
about it.
love it. And ice cream.
And ice cream. And ice cream. I know Haley's gonna make me a cake. I don't want a cake. Just give me some Ben and Jerry's. Some Haagen-Dazs. I'm good with that.
That's right. Sounds good to me. A little bit in moderation. Get some red velvet cake and rock out. Thank y'all for joining us. We hope it's been relatable, reliable, and real. It's what we do every Wednesday night on blackdoctor.org. Thank you to our sponsors. We have so many wonderful sponsors.
Yep. And thank you to Black Doctor for the platform. And I love you so much, Mo.
I love you too. I'll see you next Wednesday.
Yes. Bless you, love.
Bye.